There are some myths that refuse to stay ancient. They follow us into every season of our lives, especially the seasons where something ends, something changes shape, and we are asked to become someone new in the dark. Persephone is one of those myths. She is the tender green thing breaking through winter soil. She is also the crowned queen seated beside the dead. She is spring, but she is not untouched by winter. She is daughter, but she is also sovereign. She is return, but not without memory. And I think that is why her story has endured for so long. Because at some point, all of us will know what it means to descend. All of us know what it means to grieve. All of us will know what it means to stand somewhere between who we were and who we are becoming, wondering if anything green can ever grow again. And then somehow, possibly, something does. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Inner Circle podcast from Blackwater Apothecary. Today's episode is called Persephone Rising, Descent, Return, and the Sacred Work of Becoming. We are talking about Persephone, goddess of spring, queen of the underworld, daughter of Demeter, keeper of pomegranate arrows, and one of the most powerful mythic figures of grief, transformation, duality, and return. This episode was inspired by our April-May Just Add Magic double box, Persephone Rising, which became a meditation on Persephone, Demeter, Hades, the underworld, spring, memory, morning, and all of the small green things that rise anyway. If you are one of our subscribers, this episode can be listened to alongside your workbook and the ritual items in your box. Make your tea, light your candle, burn your incense, keep your journal nearby, and plant your seeds when you're ready. If you're not a subscriber, you're still very much welcome here because this story belongs to anyone who has ever gone through a season of darkness and wondered what it might mean to come back changed. Our Just Add Magic monthly subscription box, they're built around witchcraft, mythology, ritual, fragrance, handmade goods, and storytelling. Before we talk about the magic of the box, we need to talk about the myth beneath it. So let's begin with Persephone. To understand why Persephone's story is so powerful, we have to begin with the three central figures of the myth: Persephone, Demeter, and Hades. Persephone is the daughter of Demeter, goddess of grain, harvest, fertility, agriculture, and the growing earth. Demeter is the goddess of nourishment, abundance, cultivated fields, and the cycles that allow humanity to survive. She is not simply a goddess of pretty flowers and golden wheat. She is the divine force behind bread, harvest, food, and the fragile agreement between the earth and the people who depend on it. Persephone, her daughter, is often associated with spring, flowers, maidenhood, beauty, and new growth. She is the bright, blooming child of the harvest goddess, the tender green thing rising from the earth. And then there is Hades. Hades is the god of the underworld, ruler of the dead, lord of the unseen realm below. But it is important to understand that in Greek mythology, Hades is not the same as the Christian devil. He is not a figure of evil in that way. He's the sovereign of the realm where the dead go. His kingdom is shadowed, yes, but it is also orderly, ancient, inevitable, and full of hidden wealth beneath the earth. So already, before the story even begins, we have these enormous symbolic forces gathered together. We've got spring, harvest, death, grief, nourishment, shadow, and return. In the ancient telling, Persephone is gathering flowers when the earth opens, and Hades takes her into the underworld. Demeter, upon realizing her daughter is gone, is overcome with grief. She searches for Persephone, wandering the earth in mourning, and her sorrow is so great that the natural world itself begins to suffer. The fields go quiet. The harvest fails. The earth refuses to bloom. This is one of the things I find so striking about Demeter's role in the myth. Her grief is not private. It is not tidy. It is not something that she politely tucks away so everyone else can remain comfortable. Her grief changes the world. Eventually, Zeus intervenes because humanity cannot survive if the earth remains barren. Hermes is sent to the underworld to retrieve Persephone, but by the time Persephone is brought back, she had eaten the pomegranate seeds of the underworld. And this is where the myth turns, because food in myth is rarely just food. To eat something from a place is to become bound to it. To take its fruit into your body is to accept, or to at least participate in, a relationship with that realm. So, because Persephone has eaten the pomegranate arils, she cannot stay forever in the world above. She must spend part of the year with Demeter and part of the year below with Hades. When Persephone returns to her mother, Demeter rejoices, and the earth blooms again. Spring comes, the fields awaken, the world remembers how to grow. When Persephone descends once more, Demeter mourns, and the world moves towards autumn and winter. This is one way the myth explains the seasons: the joy of reunion, the ache of separation, the death-like hush of winter, and the impossible miracle of return. But, like all great myths, Persephone's story is not only an explanation for something that happens in nature, it is also an explanation for something that happens in us. It is a story about innocence and initiation, about grief and transformation, about the ways love can nourish us and also bind us, about the places we are taken, the places we choose, and the versions of ourselves that can only be born in the dark. Now, that is the older shape of the story. A daughter is taken, a mother grieves, a bargain is made, the seasons turn. But myths are living things. They survive because they can be retold. They can be reinterpreted. They can be entered through different doors depending on where we're standing in our own lives when we meet them. And I think that Persephone's story is one of those myths that changes dramatically, depending on which part of the story you choose to center. If we center only the taking, Persephone is a victim of the underworld. If we center only Demeter's grief, Persephone is the lost daughter. If we center only the pomegranate arils, Persephone becomes a cautionary tale about temptation, consequence, and eating strange fruit in strange places, which honestly is solid advice in both mythology and real life. But if we center Persephone herself, especially through a more modern and romantic lens, the story opens up into something much more complicated and much more interesting. In my favorite version, Persephone goes below and comes back with a crown. The underworld becomes hers in all its shadow, wealth, silence, and strange beauty. The pomegranate becomes the fruit of choice and consequence, sweet and bloody on her tongue. And Hades becomes the love she must leave in the dark each time spring demands her return. That is the Persephone I am interested in for this episode. Not because I want to erase the older myth or pretend it does not contain violence, grief, or loss, but because I think that there is power in asking what happens when Persephone is allowed to become more than the thing that happened to her. What happens when she is not only the girl who was taken, but the queen who learned to rule? What happens when she is not only the daughter returning to her mother, but the woman returning from a realm that has changed her? What happens when she loves the spring, but also misses the dark? That is the ache at the heart of this version of the myth. Persephone belongs to two worlds: the daughter of Demeter, child of wheat fields, flowers, sunlight, harvest, the warm earth, but she's also the queen of the underworld, crowned in shadow, seated among the dead, carrying the scent of pomegranate, ash, smoke, and strange flowers beneath her skin. She returns to spring, but she does not return empty-handed. She carries memory. She carries longing. She carries power. She carries the knowledge that part of her will always belong to the place that transformed her. And I think that there is something painfully human in that. Because so many of us know what it feels like to live between versions of ourselves. There's the person we were before the loss, before the illness, before the ending, before the heartbreak, before the move, before the grief, before the life we knew split open beneath our feet. And then there is the person we became after. Sometimes we return to familiar places and people, but we are not the same. Sometimes the world expects us to bloom again as if we are untouched, as if winter was only a pause, as if the underworld did not leave fingerprints on our skin. But Persephone reminds us that return does not require erasure. You can come back changed. You can love what you lost and still become. You can grieve the upper world while you are below, and grieve the underworld when you return above. You can carry two truths at once. And maybe that is why modern retellings of Persephone so often become love stories. Not just because we're all dramatic little goblins who enjoy a dark, brooding underworld husband, though obviously, yes, we are only human, but because the love story gives language to dual belonging. It lets Persephone desire the dark. It lets her choose the pomegranate. It lets her become the sovereign. It lets the underworld be more than punishment. It becomes initiation. It becomes intimacy. It becomes the place where she discovers a part of herself that could not have bloomed in the fields of her mother. And that does not make the return less beautiful. It makes it more bittersweet. Because when Persephone rises, spring comes with her. But spring does not undo what happened below. It simply proves that life can return after the dark, even when the dark remains part of the story. This is the Persephone we honor in Persephone Rising, the one who returns changed, the one who loves two worlds, the one who carries spring in one hand and shadow in the other, the one who blooms not because the dark never touched her, but because it did. So, what do we do with this myth? Because that is always the question I come back to when we talk about mythology, tarot, witchcraft, folklore, symbolism, or anything in the big, strange world of the mystical. It is not enough, at least for me, to say, here is an old story, and isn't it interesting? I want to know what it opens in us. I want to know where it pokes the bruise. I want to know what it teaches us about being human. And Persephone teaches us so much about the seasons of becoming. One of the first lessons is that descent is not always destruction. Sometimes, of course, descent is terrible. Sometimes life drops out from under us. Sometimes we are not ready. Sometimes we are not willing. Sometimes we are pulled into a season we would never have chosen for ourselves. And it is okay to name that. It is okay to say, this hurt me, this changed me, and this was not fair. But there are also times where the descent becomes initiation. A dark place can be a place of endings, but it can also be a place of revelation. The underworld is where things are hidden. It is where roots grow. It is where seeds split open. It is where the dead rest, where memory lives, where we are stripped of what we cannot follow any further. Persephone's descent asks us to consider the places in our own lives where we have been changed in the dark. Not because the darkness was good necessarily, and not because we have to be grateful for every terrible thing that has ever happened to us, but because we are allowed to claim the power we gained from surviving it. There is a difference between romanticizing pain and honoring transformation. That feels very important. We do not have to bless the wound in order to honor the scar. We do not have to call the underworld beautiful in order to acknowledge that we learned its roads. We do not have to pretend loss was a gift in order to admit that we are no longer the same person we were before it found us. Persephone also teaches us that grief is not weakness. Demeter's grief is enormous. It is world-changing. It is so powerful that the earth itself goes barren. And I love that, because so often grief is treated like something we're supposed to manage quietly, politely, and efficiently, and in a way that does not inconvenience the living. But Demeter does not do that. Demeter grieves like a goddess. She grieves with the fields. She grieves with the harvest. She grieves with the bread that cannot be made and the flowers that will not open. Her sorrow is not small because her love was not small. And maybe there is something that we can learn from that too. Maybe some griefs are not meant to be rushed. Maybe some losses deserve to be witnessed. Maybe the barren season is not a failure. Maybe it is the natural response to losing something that mattered. There is a line in the Persephone Rising workbook that says, "Sometimes grief is proof that something mattered." And I think that that is one of the quietest and truest things in this whole project. Because grief is love with nowhere familiar to go. It is devotion after the shape of things has changed. It is the body and spirit trying to understand how to keep loving when the world has rearranged itself. And then Persephone teaches us about return. Not the cheerful, polished kind of return where everything is fine now. Thank you so much for asking. No. Persephone's return is cyclical. It is complicated. It is not permanent. It is not simple. She returns to her mother and the fields, the flowers, to the upper world, but she doesn't return as the same girl who left. She's eaten the pomegranate. She's known the underworld. She has become the queen, and still, spring comes with her. That is the part that feels almost painfully merciful to me. She doesn't have to be untouched to bring the spring. She doesn't have to be innocent to bloom. She doesn't have to undo the underworld in order to return to the light. And neither do we. We are allowed to return slowly. We are allowed to return differently. We are allowed to come back with strange new knowledge, with grief in our own pockets, with our roots showing, with some parts of us still belonging to the place that changed us. There is this pressure, especially after a hard season, to get back to normal. But sometimes normal is gone. Sometimes the old shape of life is gone. Sometimes the person who could fit inside that old shape is gone too. And if that is true, then the work is not to become who we were before. The work is to become whole from here. That is very different. Persephone does not teach us to erase the descent. She teaches us to integrate it. She teaches us how to hold more than one truth at a time. I am grieving and I am growing. I miss what I was, but I'm curious about what comes next. I loved the life before, and I am becoming someone new. I belong to the spring, and I carry the underworld with me. There is no clean little moral here, which is probably why I love the myth so much. Persephone is not a simple symbol. She's not only light, not only dark, not only daughter, not only queen. She is the threshold between all of these things. And maybe that is the real sacred work of becoming. Learning not to split ourselves in half just to make other people more comfortable. Maybe becoming asks us to stop choosing between our softness and our power, our grief and our joy, our past and our future, our upper world and our underworld. Maybe becoming is learning how to say, I am all of it. I am what bloomed. I am what burned. I am what was buried. I am what came back. And I am still becoming. That is the lesson I keep finding in Persephone. Not that the dark is easy, and not that the loss is lovely. Not that every ending is secretly a blessing, but that our lives move in cycles, and even after the descent, something may still rise. Not on command, not on a deadline, not because we forced it, but when the season is right. When the roots have done their hidden work. When the soil has held us long enough. When the thing we thought was dead begins impossibly to bloom. And that is where Persephone stops being only an old story and starts becoming something that we can feel in our own bodies, in our own grief, in our own longing, in the strange ache of returning to the light while still missing something from the dark. I want to read you a poem I wrote in 2019, long before this box existed, but somehow found its way here. It is called O Mother Demeter, and it is like a letter from daughter to mother. You were the change in the leaves and the whisper of winter, ice crystals and yellow-orange autumn trees, a light burning within and so often forgotten, in flecks of memory made, succulent fruits of hellfire and crimson, drops of blood red, reeling in moments of mist and foggy mornings, of days of never-ending nights, sleepless and still. O Mother Demeter, I dream of you. Dreaming of days of sun and warmth burning here in brimstone and ash, but yet I am queen of darkness below, reigning over deviant demons devouring the tantalized and tortured souls of the lost and lonely, so like myself, yet so distant from the salvation I found in a love that broke both time and season. Oh, Mother, can I tell you how I knowingly and longingly savored the taste of each single decadent arrow of treachery, and when I return in reverent solitude, having conquered the cold nights and dark days, spring's breath filling my lungs bursting, I'll yearn for freezing air, and the warmth I reach for in the night will not be there. Whew! Love that one. So that poem was written years before Persephone Rising, before this box, before my shop closed, before this exact season of my life. But there is something strange and beautiful about the way that our own work can sometimes leave little breadcrumbs for us. Sometimes we write something long before we understand why we needed it. And now I want to close with a letter that I included in the Persephone Rising workbook. Dear ones, thank you for sharing this season with me. Persephone has always been one of those myths that refuses to stay simple. She's spring, but she's not untouched by winter. She is daughter, but she is also queen. She is the returning one, but she does not come back empty-handed or unchanged. She carries both the flowers of the upper world and the shadows of the world below, and I think that there is something deeply human in that. We all have seasons where we descend, seasons where life changes shape. Seasons where the familiar world grows quiet and we are asked gently or otherwise to become someone new in the dark. Then somehow, impossibly, something green begins again. That is the part of the myth I keep coming back to, the return. Not as a perfect undoing of what happened, not as a return to exactly what was, but as sacred continuation. Persephone returns with memory and longing and power. She returns as someone who has known the underworld and still belongs to the spring. This box was created in that strange little place between endings and beginnings, between mourning and bloom, between what has been buried and what is still becoming. It is an offering to the dirt under your nails kind of magic, the lighting a candle anyway kind of magic, the drinking tea while the world makes no fucking sense kind of magic, the planting seeds with no guarantee kind of magic. My hope is that these small objects become companions for you. A cup of tea, a flame, a scent, a seed, a page to write on when words need somewhere to go. May they offer you a moment of sweetness, a little warmth, a soft place to put your grief, and a reminder that becoming does not always happen in the light. You are allowed to return slowly. You are allowed to bloom differently. You are allowed to carry what changed you without mistaking it for all that you are. Sometimes we bloom because of the dark. Sometimes we carry the underworld with us. Sometimes what was buried was never dead at all. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Inner Circle podcast. If you are one of our Just Add Magic subscribers, thank you for being a part of this strange, beautiful little world we keep building together. I hope your Persephone Rising box meets you gently wherever you are in your own season of descent, grief, bloom, or becoming. If you are not a subscriber and this episode found you anyway, I'm so glad you're here. You can find Blackwater Apothecary online at blackwaterapothecary.com, where you can learn more about our monthly subscription boxes, handmade ritual goods, fragrances, teas, candles, and whatever else we're conjuring at any given time. If this episode meant something to you, you can share it with someone who might need it, leave a review, or come find us on social media. It helps more than you know, and it lets this work reach the people who are standing at their own thresholds. Until next time, take care of yourselves, tend what is tender, and do not demand that you bloom before your time. What is buried is not always dead.